Were there any comments thereupon?
No, looks good.
Hearing none, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, what I'd like to do very briefly, and I would like to keep it very brief, is that almost 2 months ago, we set up a whole series of goals for the individual task groups. And the objective was to complete these goals by the end of September and be able to report back on them. And I just want to briefly go through with the individual task group leaders where we stand on those goals. And if there are issues with a particular goal or particular activity, what we can do to help out to move that forward. And if not, understand at least what the issues are. So, Kia, who's not here, why don't we hold off? She just sent me an email, so she should be here soon. So moving quickly to cultural and historic resources, Mary?
Yes. My group's meeting next week, so we can bring everybody up to date on what we've been up to. So,
Okay. Do you Zoom, I assume?
we're actually going to meet outside.
Oh, that's far better.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
we were doing it by phone, but it just doesn't work.
No, it really doesn't.
Yeah.
No. And socially distanced and with masks.
Yeah.
Economic development. I regret to say that we have not been able to move any further simply because we aren't able to meet with business owners. So that I'll pull a meeting together and see if we can come up with an alternative. We have had feedback on the questionnaire that we've either submitted to business owners and gotten information back in writing, or in a number of cases, simply interviewed the business owner and documented the results. But that's the extent to which we've moved on. Housing, Chris Rogers isn't here. Stasha, can you comment on that?
Sure.
You're
So-
doing the heavy lifting now, according to the last email I saw.
I'm getting educated, let's put it that way. So I was just looking over the notes of what I had said I was going to do, and I'd probably add about like 20 other articles and resources to the list of documents that are being reviewed. We are we're trying to find a date that we can all get together in early September. Put a status for presentation to this board, and so we'll all kind of weigh in there, either via Zoom or I'll have something on a computer, so I have to figure out how to share with the group, and then we'll be good. Other than that, we're really looking forward to seeing what the survey data has to say. And in terms of the current zoning bylaws, I think the Housing Production Plan Committee did a lot of work there and had some good recommendations. I myself personally had some additional questions. And Mark, maybe you're still sitting on planning, right? Mark Sprague?
Yes.
I'm putting you on the spot. I'm wondering if I might be able to tie off with you at some point with a couple questions about the bylaws. Yes, no?
I think that was a yes.
Okay.
For some reason, we can't hear Mark, right?
Oh, is he saying yes? As there was,
Well,
I was like, maybe that's a
mouthing.
no. That could be a no. But
No, here's
I'm
the-
having Eric's really busy. He's doing the stuff down at the town center right now, and all of the awesomeness that Backyard Bolton is. And at any rate, I just could use the planning board's perspective a little bit more than it already is. I know you guys have talked a lot. So in short, I'd say we're beyond the survey data, which is something that we haven't been able to analyze yet. We're just moving forward with what we're going to present to you next month.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. Mark? Aha.
Oh, he is on
We-
mute too.
Yeah, yeah. Can you unmute yourself, or Erica, can you unmute him?
Erica's also.
I
on
don't think
mute.
his microphone's turned on.
No, I don't think so either.
I'm not sure how to fix that though for him.
No, because he's definitely not muted.
Any better?
There, that's far better. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, land use, Erica?
Hi, so we're in the process of still collecting the existing conditions data for the GIS maps. I met with Rebecca sometime in July, and she's basically given me everything that they did for the open space and rec plan, or excuse me, the open space, recreation plan. So I have that information, and then next week I have a meeting scheduled with the assessor's office to go through the data that they have. And once we have that meeting, we should be in a pretty good position to start thinking about the maps that we need. Basically, at this point, I've taken Brian's outline for the master plan, and I know he's called out some maps in that outline. So I've started to come up with a list of a list of the existing condition maps that we need. So that's kind of where we're at.
Okay. Along those lines, I was on a webinar this afternoon with an EPA presentation on the quality of water, and they have a remarkable database. Regretfully, it's in our particular area not as up to date or as accurate. Well, it's not as up to date. I'm not sure that it isn't very accurate, but I think it's something that we need to look into, and it will be, I should think, fairly useful from a conservation perspective, as well as water and sewer, since we're looking at that, but primarily subterranean water as opposed to waterways, which is what they're focused on.
Yeah, and I believe, Bob, too, there was the availability to download those resources as well as GIS layers.
Yes, there is.
I think Eric and I will look through it and see what may be usable and then compare it to what we have already as well.
Okay, and I have the presentation from that webinar. I'll send you the link. It's on the EPA site.
Okay.
It was kind of ironic. They were absolutely thrilled at the participation they had. They had 700 people watching it, but at the same time, apparently a substantial portion of the 700 people decided to try out the app at that particular moment and crash the entire system, so they couldn't do the presentation.
Yeah, I was on the
Irony was-
call as well.
Okay, municipal facilities. I have had a conversation with Penny about that. She spent a great deal of time with the chief of police, has looked over in great detail the facilities services there, as well as EMS and fire. So she's moving along well on that. Since Joe Lynch is out of action, at least for the moment, she hasn't been able to continue with that, but Joe did provide her with a substantial amount of information, both in terms of facilities and services, on a spreadsheet that I developed 20 years ago, but haven't heard back on that. So she's moving ahead. Obviously, the whole school situation at the moment is challenging. I'll leave it at that. And so we really haven't been able to get into any kind of detail on the schools beyond a couple of initial reviews and reviews of drawings. So Erica, I believe you know about that. And they've dug up literally piles of drawings that need to be reviewed. And the whole idea was, in those drawings, is there information on the facilities, the use, the objectives, et cetera. So that will be ongoing. Let's see, who's next? Kia.
Hi.
Yeah, Kia. We can't see your face, but we can hear you, I hope.
All right.
Thank
Can
you.
Let's see. All right, I'll work on that.
Okay, but in the meantime, we can hear you.
Yep.
You want to talk a bit about climate change? Rebecca, I guess you can hop in on that as well. Ken,
About what? What?
where
about-
we're,
Recent
Yeah,
accomplishments.
What
where
we're-
the group stands. I'm sorry.
I have been away and I actually haven't done much. I was going to start working on some maps with Rebecca, but I haven't had time. So Ken was gonna be working on, what was it, Ken? The sheltering?
Oh, yeah, and I have not done anything about that.
What, this is the emergency shelter? Or-
Right, right.
Okay.
We can take notes from what they're doing in New Orleans or Florida or whatever. But
Yes.
yeah, sorry, we're failures.
No, you're not. You're just
Obviously
very
not.
busy people.
Yeah, not much progress had been made, but also the mapping will be created in association with the land use task group in
Right.
terms of gathering the data and what type of mapping we want to provide. But in addition to that, we do have our more recent MVP report that's been finalized. So we'll be utilizing information from that as well. And that's the direction we're going in as well.
Okay.
All three of us are on land use. So,
Which is very convenient.
yeah, which is convenient. So, yeah, we'll keep that in mind. We might not merge totally because we do have some independent things we should be exploring, but the first things we're going to be doing are almost in conjunction with land use.
So the inter-task group communication will be very solid. Okay. Brian, Ken, population.
I was thinking I could actually do quick updates for both population and finances.
Good.
So just briefly on population, we'll talk more about this when we get to the remap agenda item, but that's sort of the main potential demographic project that we'll be working on between now and September. So, you know, other than that, like the population data that we've already pulled hasn't changed. So then in terms of finances, Bob, you already know this, but Ken and I are going to put together sort of like a primer or a frequently asked questions about Bolton's tax rate and tax bill and how does it get calculated, all the things about that, because we realized in looking at the survey, there's just a lot of questions, I guess implied questions about Bolton's taxes. So we want to try to create something that's relatively easy to digest and helps to educate the public about what's going on here in town.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, and it was very, very clear from the answers and the answers to open-ended questions that people were very concerned about taxes, but frankly, were uninformed about the basis for taxes, tax rates, tax bills, and my concern as well. It was interesting to hear people say their taxes are very high, but it's wonderful that we have a great education system. And I think probably communicating the link between the two is also fairly important.
Mm-hmm.
While we're on it, Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about remap, since I don't think everybody is familiar with that, what it is, how it started with us, et cetera?
Oh, sure. Do you want me to just skip ahead to that and cover it now?
Yeah, why don't you just do that since.
Sure. So I think, as everybody knows, Bolton is part of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, the MAPC, and each part of the state has their own regional planning authority, but MAPC is ours, and MAPC also handles kind of like all of greater Boston. And one of the things that they did immediately after George Floyd's killing and all the protests that emerged from that was they partnered with an organization to create what they're calling the Racial Equity Municipal Action Plan. And the basic idea is to help communities try to get some baseline data and information about equity, like baseline equity statistics right now within a community. And obviously Massachusetts has 351 cities and towns, and each one is a little bit differently situated. But it's trying to help communities think through what their stats are now and understand why they might be where they are. And are there things that the community as a governmental entity can do to try to move toward greater equity and justice? And so if I could actually, can I share my screen for just 1 second, Bob?
Yeah, Erica, can you orchestrate that?
Brian, I think you have
Yep.
the authority or the ability to do it. Okay.
Okay, so this is just, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's just a quick snapshot based on 2019 federal census estimates that just show where Massachusetts is in terms of racial diversity and then where Bolton is in terms of racial diversity. And so obviously there's a pretty big difference between Bolton and the rest of Massachusetts. And my purpose is not to prejudge why there's a difference. I think if we're accepted to the REMAP program, the idea will be to try to understand why there's a difference and just get the community started in talking about whether there's something that we want to try to do about it. I'll stop sharing. So what we did is we put together an application, and by September 10th, we will know whether Bolton has been accepted. And if we are, then what we'll do is we'll be able to weave in some of the tools that they're giving us into our master planning process. So I'm happy to answer any questions people have about that. Yeah.
Hi. So I went through the grant application. So what did you put down as Bolton's needs for racial equality?
Yeah, so we presented the statistics that show that we are currently a very homogenous community, both in terms of racial diversity and socioeconomic diversity. And so we said that one of our needs is like understanding why the status quo is what it is, because there's all sorts of reasons that that could be. And then we were also saying that like part of the problem is you look around at who's on this Zoom and we don't really have any diverse faces involved. And so like we're sort of having these conversations in a vacuum without input from affected communities. And so one of the things that would be great about participating in REMAP is would be able to do some peer learning with communities that are already more diverse. They're only going to take, unfortunately, they're only going to take like 3 to 5 communities.
Yes, I read that. So it's, it's a long shot.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, yes and no. I mean, I think we're probably coming in as a real outlier. And they may look at us as an outlier and realize that they need to look at an outlier because that's very different than a number of the more urban areas. So I think our chances are better than even. All right,
Ryan,
better
I
than
just have
even.
a quick question about it. Do they, throughout their process or within the tools that they may allow if we're accepted into that program, do they consider environmental justice as part of that assessment? And are you familiar with that?
Yeah. So
concept?
and I think that's definitely woven in throughout. And depending on the communities that are accepted, right? Like I think Bolton presents some interesting opportunities for the program because we already have some really, I mean, clearly we're a desirable community, right? And I feel like there's tons of people around the state who would love to benefit from some of the natural resources that we have here. So, and Rebecca, by the way, if we are accepted, we're supposed to put together a core team of between 6 and 12 people. And so we would love to have somebody from conservation or the trust or wherever, like pulling together as part of that team.
Sure. And I would be interested in either assisting with that or assisting in finding someone who would fit that need. But I was just curious because I think it's a great assessment to do, but I was curious if they were including that environmental aspect, but that's helpful. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Can I ask where the application is, the filled out one? Is that on their Dropbox?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It's oddly enough in a folder called REMAP.
I need to find
Although
that.
I
folder.
don't have, Erica, could you post the final signed version that Don put out?
Will do.
Thanks. Okay, let's see, let's continue on. well, let's public outreach and communication. I'm embarrassed to say that we were reminded by the press that we needed to reach out to the press. Ken Cleveland sent an email off to Brian saying, hey guys, what's happening? And I sent him, as I'm oft noted to do, a staggering amount of information. And then he sent another email back and saying, could you answer these 6 questions? And I did it. And I believe I copied at least everybody on public outreach on that. But that's something that we need to get serious about. I know we've been very good about dealing with the independent, but the item is read by, I would suspect, equal to or more than people who read the independent. And Ken offered up that he would be interested in having a regular, report from us, a column, much akin to what we currently have to inform people about particular subjects or the status of the overall master planning process, et cetera. So I will pull together a Zoom with outreach and communication, and we can talk about the best way to do that. But I believe everybody involved has a copy of what I sent Ken initially and what I subsequently sent in response to his questions. So that's where we stand there. The survey. Molly, you're on mute.
Yes, it's I'm just plowing through the last 600 or so of the things you don't like about Bolton. But I've realized there's like 3,600 lines I had to go through. So I went through the pros and I put together a little chart, and I'll send that out later, Bob. But the pros was pretty, homogenous. Like, it's beautiful, it's rural, it's charming. It's, so that aspect was actually really quite fun.
Great school system. Right?
Great school system, which is funny because then a lot of the complaints were about the school system. Community policing, amenities. So there's a lot of really positive things that came out of that one. And now I'm working on the cons, I guess you could call them cons, which Phoebe, is a little bit more tricky because people had a lot to say. So it wasn't as easy to just kind of filter through and try to find, basic generic answers as it was with the pros. So obviously the usual suspects are only taxes, and there's a lot of issues with traffic, and apparently a lot of strife with the transfer station not being open very long, and the tree warden is apparently not doing his job. So it's been very interesting, and a few other extraneous comments, which I'm just bucketing into other. So like I said, I have about 600 more lines to go through, and I thought it was going to be a lot less time consuming than it was. So I'm sorry I hadn't planned to get it done tonight, but I will just after this meeting.
Okay, are you still looking at it by age group?
Bob, don't kill me.
Well, and Tia just suggested, gee, why don't we do about time in Bolton, which is one of the things that we had looked at.
Yeah.
And incidentally, Lee Shanny cannot work on it. I mean, she's absolutely overwhelmed. She got back to us and said, can't do it. I'd love to do what I did 20 years ago, but cannot do it.
No, it's a lot. So, I mean, I can definitely look at it by age group, but I mean, it's pretty continu. I mean, I can do that, but it's going to take longer.
You know
Well,
what?
All together.
I think we can use the survey later if we come to the conclusion we want to know something like,
yeah, true.
What do seniors, what did seniors say? If we can figure out the age group that we have some plan to do something about, or what do people who move to Bolton say they want? And is that opposite of what people who already live here want, or is it something new? I mean, obviously there's more people moving to Bolton. I mean, I don't think you have to do that immediately, but we should just keep the survey in mind as a resource.
No, yeah, I think that's a very good perspective. And if you recall the amount of effort that was required to go do all those directional bubble charts with overlaying groups' perspectives about very different issues, was just a staggering amount of work done with a pretty sophisticated tool. But I think to me, it was kind of interesting that I did go through it. And Molly provided the information, and it's easy to sort. Looking at open-ended question responses, particularly the very last one, by age group. And it was kind of interesting to see the difference. And it was the kind of thing that you would expect with the older group, system. Why am I paying all these taxes? I can't live here anymore. Middle group got great, interesting contradictions of great school system, but I have serious concerns with it, which I thought, well, a lot of that was pretty specific in a number of cases. And then the people who moved to Bolton had very similar perspectives, the younger people rather, with the people in the middle age group, since we broke it out that way. But it was kind of interesting to read through it. And as you say, Kay, if we need that information, we can go find it. We can go sort it. But it's just, to me, it was fascinating just to take the Excel spreadsheet, which is pretty easily sortable, and look at not only the answers to the last big sets of comments, but the individual answers to the three sets of, give me your positives, give me your negatives, etc. Anyway, so at this point, you have what you have. I think the PowerPoint is a pretty good representative of where people's heads are at the moment. And Molly will take a look at not breaking it down by age group, not breaking it down by time in Bolton, but just a representative idea. Brian, you had talked about doing I keep calling it a mind map, a word map.
Yeah, I tried to look into whether there was an easy way to do that online, and I haven't found one yet. I don't know.
You mean a heat map?
Yeah, exactly, like
Heat
a
map, yeah.
or like a word cloud sort of a thing.
I have like an old one I can try to use, but
And it may
I don't know how
be,
useful it'll be.
yeah, and the tricky thing too is that like we'd have to create maps for individual questions, because if we just put all the text in, then you'd get like like taxes would be this big, and it might be like, I don't know. You just probably want to separate it out.
Yeah.
But it does raise a question about like how and when do we want to try to start sharing some of the findings with the public?
Well, I think, my view is fairly soon. I don't think we need to get into all the detailed comments, but I think at least the graphs and the PowerPoint are something that we do want to put out there. Thoughts on how to do it? I mean, we can certainly put it on the web, but I think we need to give it more visibility than just posting it.
Well, you could have a little PR article in the paper that highlighted a few of the things and then point them to the presentation, which I think is very good, as something that they could go to look at for more detail. And that could be on the website or wherever. So that's the way I would handle it.
Maybe Nikki would be interested in doing a viewing or a showing rather on Access Television and just advertised on the website, or like Ken said, in the paper, having a feature in the paper directing people to when it's going to be able to be viewed.
Yeah, there is a PowerPoint, Nikki. And it gives you both graphical information and statistical information.
Right.
So. Okay. So why don't we, well, first of all, I'd like to get together no later than the middle of next week with the outreach and communication team and figure out exactly how we want to do this. And then we'll get that information to you. And then it can suggestion, come up with something that we can put in the paper and then get it up on the web. And also, obviously, if we can get it out in Facebook as well, which is probably, frankly, a more common communication media than the web is at the moment.
Yeah,
So
and you're going to hit, and if you put it on the community page, you're going to hit several hundred people immediately that way. And so that will be good.
Okay. Rod didn't send out a bunch of emails. Megan, Abby, does next Wednesday work for you guys?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
No.
Okay, Kia.
I can't do Wednesdays.
Okay, what's good for you?
Any other day except Wednesday.
Oh, it's, poor planning on my part there. Okay, how about moving it up to Tuesday?
Okay.
Tuesday work
What
for
time
everybody?
would we do our 4:30 thing?
Yeah, let's do that. Does it still work 4:30?
Yeah.
Pardon my ignorance, but when you guys are back in remote school?
The 16th of September. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's get one of the things that we wanted to discuss, hopefully briefly and with specificity, is the whole Taggart issue. And I guess the whole issue had been brought up by Chris Rogers and it started with Kia looking at, gee, are there other things that we can do and what are the limitations and how can we be careful about unnecessarily limiting the use of the Taggart property. So Rebecca, I think you had put out a huge amount of information on the Taggart property, and incidentally, it's probably, for my money, the best communicated piece of conservation or other acquisition property that the town has ever done. I've been involved in many of them, as has Ken, I know, and this one was absolutely astounding in every media. So good for that. But okay, so Rebecca, you want to talk a little bit about the initial conversation with Mrs. Taggart and what ultimately that has transitioned into in terms of agreement the town has and what the extent of that agreement is and what the potential limitations, if any, are with respect to the funding agencies that we've applied to.
Sure. I would be happy to. So the commission authorized me to reach out to Ms. Taggart on July 1st of 2019. And it was just to find out what her goals were. So in response to that, she said, yes, I'm still interested in protecting the land, but I can't simply donate it. I need to be compensated, which made sense to me. We saw it for sale, obviously, and it was quite a bit of money. So I understand that she wouldn't be able to just donate that. It was communicated to us when we spoke to her on the phone, since she lives out in California. So we set up a phone call, we meaning myself and Dawn, our town administrator. And she specifically wanted the property to go to town use. And she didn't state a difference of town use in terms of a structure or a field or conservation. It was in honor of her family, which actually is her father, family member being her father, who really enjoyed the town and wanted to, in the past, set aside some land on that parcel if it were to be subdivided. It did not happen. So we were bringing up that conversation again. So she stressed throughout the conversations with myself via email, on the phone, and with Dawn present that it needs to go to town use. And I believe, and I'm not putting words in her mouth because it wasn't directly asked, but other than the stress of town use, we did not ask, can we sell off a lot and then to offset the costs or anything to that nature. She continuously stressed, so long as it is for town use. And in the discussions about the cost of acquiring the property for the town to purchase it for town use, she again was stressing the fact that it needs to go to town use for her to sell it to the town at half of our appraised value. So it wasn't even half of hers. Half of hers would have been 650,000. So it was down to 550,000. At that time, the commission was the one bringing it forward and having the conversations. The intent of the original letter was to preserve the land for the wildlife corridor, which had been brought up to her in 2005 originally. After conversations and public meetings with the Board of Selectmen, they noted, is there any way that maybe we want to build a new town hall or something to that nature in the near future, but again, for town use, could we subdivide or save some of that land for a land banking purpose, again, for town use? And there was no severe issue with that or any red flags with that. And after speaking at the meeting, it seemed like 3 acres or 3.5 acres was enough. Again, after continued conversation, checking with our town planner in terms of zoning and those regulations, we realized that in order to meet local zoning regulations, it would have to be 4.5 acres. So that's where we got that number from, again, at a Board of Selectmen meeting. So that's the concept that was carried through, that the land would be conserved or preserved, and the conserved, excuse me, and then the 4.5 acres would be left as a concept for a land bank. So in the future, some sort of other municipal use outside of conservation could be further investigated and potentially utilized. But as we know, throughout the process, we also noted that access was an issue, not only for the slope, but because of the wetland resource areas along the frontage of the property. And then the floodplain and Still River, which is across the road and meanders along Forbush Mill Road. And the grants that we applied for that have been communicated again throughout the process at Conservation Commission meetings and Board of Selectmen meetings have all been conservation focused or forestry focused. There was one that had come up more recently. It's the 2nd year they're offering it. I was told that our acquisition of the property, in light of being a climate resiliency measure or climate adaptation measure and framed in that way, would be a really innovative way to use the funds. And that is the Mapc Accelerating Climate Resiliency Grant, which we did apply for. We also applied for the land grant. And the land grant, the Mapc grant did not specify the type of use because it wasn't required, and just specified town use. It did express the background information of part of it will be conservation, but there is a potential land bank for 4.5 acres. For the land grant, we did distinguish, again, more specifically, 4.5 acres, the rest will be conservation. Part of the land grant, the park grant, would have allowed for structures to be on the property, but solely used for recreational purposes. So the land grant is solely for conservation. You can actively manage the land through forestry, hunting. And again, that's not to be misconstrued to say that we're allowing hunting. I'm just talking about active management practices, but also just trails. There was, during the site visit, a question about a potential town garden there. That wasn't something we put in our application, but I noted that that may be something the town would inquire about in the future, but that wasn't part of our application. So the land grant was noting the 4.5 acres and then keeping the rest in the long-term forestry use, because it's currently in Chapter 61 with the long-term forest management plan. And as part of that forestry portion of the property, we would allow the trails to exist. We would maintain the trails. There would be outreach associated with that. We would want to get the school involved directly, whether it be through science programs or English courses, and try and create that connection since it's right down the street. And we'll actually have minimal road walking aside from crossing 117, which I realize is dangerous. But I don't know if that answers all of your questions. Does that bring us to now, or did I leave anything out?
The main question is the 4.5 acres set in stone at this point?
As far as I'm aware, yes. So, and that meaning what is in the 4.5 acres, that was seen as a land bank. That's what the request was. So that's how we've carried it through. But there's no decision that has been made that said it's going to be a new town building, it's going to be a water supply, it's going to be a field. That hasn't been discussed at this time, because as we've discussed throughout this process with the Board of Selectmen and Concom, is that the access is a hurdle that we need to get over that would require more funding to get an engineer in there to see if it can be done.
I had hopefully a quick question. When you were going through the description, you said that originally you were talking about 3 or maybe 3.5 acres. And then I think you said based on some zoning regulations, it turned into 4.5. Could you just say a little bit more about like how 4.5 was landed on?
Sure, and maybe Erica can help me clarify that as well. But when I was speaking with Erica, I was asking about the subdivision of the property and how, and more in general, but rather specific to this property. I realized that there was a conceptual plan for a subdivision road that was before the planning board at some time, because Erica had brought that to my attention. So obviously that's a use that is accepted. What I was inquiring about, instead of creating a subdivision road, can you subdivide the lot and create 2 lots or 1? And again, this was just fact finding at the time. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, Erica, but I believe the other option was to split it into 2, and 1 would have to be the 4.5 acres. That's the smallest size lot you can have with that frontage. Is that correct?
Yeah, backland lot, right?
Yeah.
That's correct. So technically, if you look at that parcel, it actually doesn't even have sufficient frontage to be a buildable lot on its own. It's got less than 200 linear feet of frontage. So to make that a buildable lot, you would have to permit it as 2 backland lots, one having the 4.5 acres and then one having the remaining land, if you wanted to make it buildable.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was how, after speaking with Erica, we realized, okay, putting aside 3 acres or 3.5 really does nothing, because at the end of the day, that's in violation of our local regulations. So changing it to 4.5 allows that use to be there as a land bank project. That was a little backwards to say, but I hope that came across correctly.
So I'm still confused. Would the if you had an access road, and it looks like from the development plan that Erica showed us, there's really only one way to access the property. And the developer who drew those house lots sort of designed that as the only probably feasible way. But if you were to divide this lot, would that access road be part of one lot or the other? Well, I mean, if the town wanted to build something there, and they obviously need the access road to access that building or use, is the 4.5 acres including the access road? So
Yes.
the usable part of 4.5 acres is actually reduced quite a bit, because there is quite a bit of road that you would use, there's quite a bit of land to get the access into the property.
Right, you're correct. So what was discussed at the Board of Selectmen meeting or brought up was, again, that 3 acres, 3.5 acres. And the reason why that number was given was looking at the size of our town hall now, which is quite minimal and which is wonderful. Then looking at the amount of parking that we would need in that area for a new town hall. Again, not the same size, but a rough estimate. And I believe, and I could go back and check, the town administrator was the one who made the comment about this. We would probably need about 3 acres, 3.5 acres for a town hall with acceptable parking and the road. So we can go back and look at those, that video if you would like, but that's why it was discussed, and the access was definitely included in that statement as well.
Okay, that answers the question. Stasha?
Super quick, was there, and you might have said this already, but I was going in and out. So just wondering if there's any legal documentation or if everything was a verbal understanding.
Can you say that again? So can you, I guess I understood what you said. I mean,
Okay.
I heard what you said. Can you
Okay.
maybe clarify it? Are you asking if there's,
So
if
like
there's a
when,
document holding her to that statement?
is there
saying
is there a
yes?
document holding us to the verbal agreement?
Yes, we have the purchase and sales agreement as well as the town article that was voted on, along with minutes from both Concom and Board of Selectmen.
I'm sorry, I'll watch it back. Can you repeat that one more time? My
Yeah.
thing's going in and out.
That's okay. I saw it sort of freeze for a second.
Sorry.
So we have the minutes from the Concom meeting, the Board of Selectmen. We have the article that was at town meeting. We have the question that was at town election. We also have the purchase and sales agreement that we're finalizing, and then we'll be working to close by the end of October.
And did you say it was mentioned in that purchase and sales agreement as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're talking about the 4.5 split? The acreage
Just the
split?
use of the land. I know I'm thinking of Perkins Park actually, which I think was
Okay.
like gifted land, and how
Yep.
there was like a requirement there. And I'm wondering how bound we are with this piece as well, as a town.
Sure, I can confirm that in the purchase and sales agreement, but when the deed is written up, that's really where that purpose is going to be reflected. But in the purchase and sales, it does state town use. So we are definitely, I know that language is in there. I'll have to double check for the acreage.
And it binds her and honors her request,
Correct.
in a legal way. So I just wanted to make sure it was in there.
Yes.
So
Okay.
what do people think though? Is there any way we could get more than 4.5 acres for town use?
I would say no.
I mean, we'd have to go back to the annual town meeting.
And potentially you may have to
It was
go to the
not,
legislature to take it out of Article 97 if that's the route
Right.
the deed
Well-
ends up documenting it in.
I don't think the town meeting was binding about the 4.5 because it was not in the article. And I asked on town meeting floor for somebody to explain the 4.5 acres and no one ever did. So other than the postcard, most people did not know that only 4.5 acres was going to be set aside for land bank town use.
But
So-
wasn't Rebecca, wasn't the town meeting article written to buy it under the chapter that deals with conservation land?
So it was written, yes,
4473 or whatever it is?
yes. So it was.
Article
written-
97, right?
No,
Article what?
no, it's purchased under the state law of chapter 44, section 7C or something like that,
Yes.
which
so
is
we
what
did-
you buy conservation land under. And if it's purchased under that, then no, you can't go in. Then it falls under the Chapter 97, and you can't just
Right.
go in and say, well, no, we don't want to use this that way now.
Right, and the Article 97, we actually have to write into the deed, and council is already aware of that, to my understanding, in terms of making it a binding and making it more of a perpetuitous addition to the deed itself, because we do have, just sort of an aside, we do have conservation properties that aren't under Article 97. We would still have to go to town meeting to take them out, but the Article 97 is a more difficult process.
Well, it has to go to the state and be
Yeah, it's a
voted.
2/3 vote of the legislature
Right.
Correct.
to take it out.
Which was very useful in the case of pipelines.
But in the
Yeah, I mean, I think whether or not it was in the article, and frankly, I don't have it in front of me, but the fact that certainly it was in all of the PR that came out, including the postcard that came around, and the fact that it was an agreement that the selectmen had, I think we're pretty bound. I think the lesson learned may be that people ought to pay more attention to what's being publicized in terms of acquisition of land and what might be done in order to make it somewhat more useful in other areas. But beyond that, I'm not sure that there's anything that can be done at this point. Now, one other thing, and I don't think we want to take this, as you had written, at least in your email to me, to fight with anybody about it. But I think what the lesson learned here is that we need to move forward with the master plan as quickly as possible so that we're able to articulate what the future needs for land banking for the town are, and then identify not only that, but the characteristics of the land that needs to be used for particular purposes. And then we'll have a very, very solid case for going ahead and saying, either when a piece of land becomes available, we have a set of criteria on which to base a recommendation, or if we're really up against a wall, which may be the situation as the town grows and matures, that we may have to go offer to buy valuable land. And we want to make mighty sure that what we're going after meets the needs that we have projected as part of the master plan. So I think it's incumbent upon us as a team to be able relatively quickly to provide those criteria as we move forward and look for land banking. And so the whole recreational element of open space, as well as municipal services and facilities, as well as historic and cultural facilities, under which certainly, a senior center and other things might well fall. We've got to be able to bring to bear all of those criteria and recommendations. So it's up to us, folks.
I would agree.
To get there as quickly as we can. Okay, any other questions? Okay, one last thing. Mark, we didn't get to water and sewer.
Okay.
Almost made it.
I was hoping. Hey, we've had a couple of meetings. There's I think we have another one next week.
Yeah, next Monday, the 31st, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And we're starting to make some plans on starting to sketch out what we might consider for an emergency water supply, whether it's because of drought or because of, an ice storm knocking people's power out, or, situations like that where people need access to water, not necessarily drinking water, but water for other uses that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. We're starting to look at some other water use a little bit of education on some of the other water uses that people have, and starting and looking at kind of where are the aquifers in town and where the higher producing aquifers or the more marginal ones, and something that we can look at kind of driving to the kind of the planning board is we look at where do we want to encourage growth or discourage growth in the town. So if we want to look at some sort of very dense zoning, if we put that in some place that has a very marginal aquifer, then we're kind of setting everybody up for trouble with running out of water. Whereas if we can zone that into an area that's has a very highly productive aquifer, then that'll be that's one thing that we won't have to worry about as much. Did I miss anything, Bob?
No, and I think we are turning up a fair amount of data.
Yeah.
Although actually more than a fair amount, like, every well that has been drilled since 1990, and the depth to refusal and the depth to water, and at least the initial yield of the well, which is useful information, but it's going to get Erica and Rebecca into a fairly interesting GIS issue, because we'll have to figure out how much of, what the groundwater elevations are. But I think what we're talking about within the group is, where do we stop? Do we want to get into this? And I think the answer is no, but we want to lay out a roadmap to do that, because that does get down to being a criterion for land banking. What's underneath it, and how much of it is there, and how easy is it to get to, and what is the infrastructure necessary to do so. So that'll be part of this, but we could do this for a very long time. But getting the information together and laying out the game plan for an action plan that follows the master plan, I think is very critical. And that's where we are with it. Yes, you covered everything, and I just reiterated it. Sorry.
Okay, good.
Okay, Messrs. Troop and Chumo, can we hear about transportation?
Yeah, can I share my screen?
You certainly may, I hope.
It works, good. Okay, so we put together a few little slides for us, and what we're not sure of is, I gotta get rid of this. There we go. Come on, there we are. Okay, and small this. Get rid of this. So I'm going to start off and cover some of this, and then I'll turn it over to Mary when we get into some of the details of what's going on right now. But these are kind of the topics that we've been looking at in the transportation part of this, and it's no surprise that traffic is one of the first things that we talk about. And one of the things I'll talk about in a minute is some stuff that came out of the survey that is kind of interesting about private cars and traffic and things of that sort. But prior to the pandemic, congestion was a huge problem on 117. That's kind of been the primary benefit of the whole pandemic in this area, has been the drop in the traffic. But what it's meant with the increases in the traffic is that the roads really aren't adequate to handle the traffic. And so we've tried to do things, to do road improvements that would help either to reduce the congestion and improve the flow, or to improve or maintain the safety while we're doing it. And a lot of that needs money. Most of that needs money. Some of it comes from us, some of it comes from the state, and we'll talk more about that when we get into some of the details. We don't have much public transport in the town, but we will talk about some of the things that are being worked on, particularly surrounding the Council on Aging, because they're kind of interesting and may relate to some things that are in the long run, at least, that are in the survey too. So it's not a surprise to any of you, but might be to some of the newer people who would hear this kind of TED Talk, is that we've got people from Bolton who are going places, but the real problem in town is the through commuters because of where we are with 117 and 495. You've got people going to the east and you've got people going to the west, and they do it through town. Interestingly, this picture I took last week, I had a lot of trouble finding a traffic backup to take a picture of because we don't really have them right now. But we certainly usually do, and have historically had those. And this picture is at the light at the southbound ramp of 495, which going west is a huge problem. At night we have trucks that are off and on there, and things of that sort. And this isn't new. The 2006 master plan talked about our being a major commuting route, and that being one of the reasons for housing growth in the area and for the traffic that's increased. And there's certainly been a lot of increases since 2005, it seems to me. And as we know, and as the truckers know, it's faster to get to Fitchburg going 117 to 190 than it is to going up to Route 2. And so that always makes a big difference. And so the traffic congestion on 117 has led to issues at intersections like Harvard and Manor or Green and Forbush, which have their own safety issues associated with them, and where there aren't any signals of any kind. And so the congestion is still is a huge problem, or will be once the pandemic is over. And what I've noticed is people drive a lot faster. So there's maybe less traffic, but they're driving faster, which may be more of a problem in itself. These are some of the survey results, and the slides that Molly did show even better what was the situation there. But most people drive their own cars to work. Having carpooled myself for 25 years to Cambridge, I was kind of amazed to see that 5 people in the survey said they carpooled out of everybody who answered it. The other thing that came across, and we were talking earlier about the verbal comments. There were a lot of verbal comments about the traffic congestion on 117. There were also comments about the speed on the back roads, which is sort of contributed to by the congestion on 117, because people find it faster to go the back way, and with less traffic, then they end up driving faster. There's also an interest in more sidewalks, and the Complete Streets program we'll talk about later has helped us to get some sidewalks. But that's something that people want both in their own neighborhoods and especially on 117. The big problem, and this was when you were talking about the big words that came out and taxes and stuff, most people said they wanted more businesses. We were talking about the biggest one, as I recall, of amenities that people wanted were restaurants and drugstore. And there was just a general interest in having more businesses. Trouble is that increases traffic. And then at the same time, people say they want lower taxes, which may mean less money there for traffic improvements that are needed to deal with the increased traffic. So there are a lot of contradictions in the survey, and contradictions between what the realities of money and the realities of people's thinking and the realities of traffic in the town. I'm going to turn it over to Mary now to talk about the specifics on some of the roads and the improvements that we've been working on in town.
And can I hop in for 1 second? One of the things that has come out of the economic development questionnaires is somewhat ironic. A number of people have said that they felt that it was very important to have more businesses on 117 because there's more traffic there. And in the same breath, one of the problems with 117 is there's too much traffic. So
Yeah.
it was very, very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, everything we're dealing with is contradictions. And I guess that's the whole master planning process in a nutshell.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. So Mary, you want to take it
Yep.
from here?
Okay, thanks, Ken. So we have, this is a breakdown of the different types of roads that we have. Route 117 being a minor arterial, and then our major collector roads such as Hudson, Still River, Wattaquatic. And then you have your side, your local roads, which are your side roads such as Sugar, Berlin, Wilder, minor roads, and then your lanes, which are basically dead end streets. These local roads are frequently used as cut-throughs during commuter hours when traffic on Route 117 becomes congested. It creates safety issues and negatively impacts quality of life for people who live along these roadsides. Better management of Route 117 is necessary to reduce this problem. The Bolton DPW is responsible for the maintenance improvements. We do have a scenic roads bylaw, and the survey indicated that we really value our winding stone wall and tree-lined country roads, and many of them have been designated as scenic roads. That means that it allows the town to preserve the qualities and character of these roads, and any repair, maintenance, reconstruction, or even paving work done on a scenic road should not involve cutting or removing the trees or tearing down or destroying the stone walls, except with written consent by the planning board after a public hearing. At present, there are 42 scenic roads designated in Bolton, and this list does need to be updated. So here you have some visuals of a scenic road on Old Bay Road. And then we have some of our new construction projects along 117. As part of the MassWorks project, you have a left turning lane onto Wattaquatic. It's not showing the lights, but the lights have now been installed. Bike lane and parking, and this is an indented bay parking area in front of the town common, which is really a very cool feature that was added for parking. And you also have the crosswalk lights at Mechanic, and there will be activated crosswalk lights across Main at the Wattaquatic intersection. So next slide. So speed limits. This is a very contentious issue for people in town. If a road does not have a speed limit, and most of our local back roads do not have speed limits, the way to set a speed limit requires getting the 85th percentile speed. And this is based on the premise that the majority of drivers choose reasonable speeds for given road conditions, and they should be accommodated. This rule is very frustrating to many people, but it is the method in order to get a speed limit on a roadway. And it involves a traffic study and then approval by Mass DOT. The town has recently received approval to regulate speed limits in 2 different areas, in thickly settled areas, and also to establish designated safety zones. And this was approved at 2018 town meeting. And Bolton accepted the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 90, Section 17C and 18B, and that allows the Board of Selectmen to reduce the speed limit from 30 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour in a thickly settled or business district. And right now, our thickly settled district is in the town center. It also, we're required, we can establish a designated safety zones with a 20 mile an hour speed limit. And both of these would require an engineering study and also approved by Mass DOT. So next slide. So here's a list of past work on Bolton roads. Over the past 2 decades, committees have been formed and reports issued that call out safety issues and recommendations for our town roadways. Many of these recommendations are being implemented through the combined effort of DPW, Planning, Public Safety, Board of Selectmen, and the Public Ways Safety Committee. Next slide. So we're really fortunate that we're finally seeing some traffic improvements along 117 with the MassWorks project at 117 and Wattaquatic intersection. Also setting up the school safety warning signs near the high school, a pedestrian crosswalk signals at 117 and Mechanic, and the 4 radar speed signs along 117 that collect data. So transportation needs, we're changing to meet the 21st century demands. Ride sharing, more walkable and bike friendly communities, and more embedded transit options are all on the rise. And Bolton is making improvements to meet these needs. So in the main Wattaquatic intersection project, along sought for sidewalk extension up to Memorial Field, now allows for safe pedestrian access to other destinations within the town center. And as I can see with the culvert work that's being done on Wattaquatic, it looks like they'll be extending the sidewalk up to the intersection of Berlin and Wattaquatic. Next slide. So we've recently received some funding for projects, especially the MassWorks project. We received $975,000 to do this project, and it's almost near completion. This project is going to improve the roadway and pedestrian and bicycle safety, as well as access for emergency vehicles at the intersection, with the installation of an actuated traffic signal with emergency preemption to allow fire and police first responders to exit the public safety building. This project also includes crosswalks with lights, bike lanes, ADA compliant sidewalks, and parking spaces along 117. We've always had parking along 117. It's now that we have line striping to show people where they can park. Also, turning lane and traffic lights will improve traffic flow, and a truck exclusion on Wattaquatic is being investigated. So we also are applying for a Complete Streets grant. So Complete Streets, for if anyone is not familiar with the program, is a program that provides safe and accessible options for all travel modes, walking, biking, transit, and vehicles for people of all ages and abilities. Bolton is participating in Mass DOT's Complete Streets funding program, and this provides technical assistance and construction funding to eligible communities that pass a complete street policy and develop a prioritization plan, which Bolton has done. We have submitted a grant application for $394,000 to provide funding for the construction of vehicle driver, bicyclist, and pedestrian safety improvements along Main Street between Mechanic and Town Hall to tie in and complete with the MassWorks project. Information on the MassWorks project and Complete Streets is available on the DPW page of the town website. And next page. So road maintenance and improvements, and this is just a list of all the things that the Department of Public Works does. The mission of the DPW is to enhance Bolton's quality of life by providing services that maintain and improve the town's infrastructure while preserving the natural beauty of the local area. So now I'm going to turn it back to Ken.
So that work that you just saw is paid for essentially in 2 ways. Chapter 90 funds are received by formula from the state, and this year that's just short of $300,000. And then there's a local roads account in DPW, which this year was just under 200,000, and that is what's used for the kind of maintenance that was on the previous slide that showed all the different day-to-day and week-to-week maintenance that occurs. Also in their budget, of course, is snow and sand and all of the work that's associated with clearing the roads in the winter. But what, as you will recall from recent town meetings, what they end up doing is when there's a big project that's needed, particularly a culvert replacement, which is not something that fits nicely into the Mass Works sorts of projects, those are done by annual town meeting articles. And so they're usually paid for either out of free cash or sometimes with a relatively short-term borrowing. But the bottom line in all of this is that there's actually more road work that needs to get done than there is funding. And it's worth, in fact, going back to this slide. The picture that's over on the left is again up on Old Bay, but that shows those little wiggly lines are one of the things that the DPW has done for a number of years on the back roads to sort of keep them together and keep them usable without having to resurface them as often as they would resurface 117, which leaves that money that available to use on the more traveled roads. Eventually, that's not good enough, but that's the kind of short-term work that gets done within their budget. And so it's a not insignificant part of the town budget. And there is some money from the state as well as then these other programs that for getting grants that we would have. Let me just mention a minute about school transportation. It's not something we have a whole lot to do with because of the school district being regional, but they handle all the school buses by a contract. The town has nothing to do with it. Certainly parents drop off and pick up their children at Florence Sawyer, and some older high school students drive. There's a fairly large parking lot there, and so there are often safety issues surrounding the exit from the high school, and there's almost always a police officer present when school lets out, both to let the buses and the students out, and then similarly at Florence Sawyer. There's bus service on most of the roads in town, but I can remember some of them. I can remember a big argument with the school years ago when the people who lived on Annie Moore wanted the bus to go up there, and the school didn't want to go up on Annie Moore Road. In the end, they did, and it wasn't a problem. But that's something that becomes important to the town in that the bus companies that work for the school, and because of the size of the buses and because of the importance of the people that they're carrying, they need to have adequate roads, adequate turning radii, and other things of that sort if they're going to serve the town and pick up the kids and get them home when they need to get them home. Now, there is a program that they have that the police department sponsors about safe walking to school, but that's basically a one-time-a-year thing right now. And currently everybody in the district, even people who live within walking distance of the schools, ride the buses. So it's an important part of the road traffic that goes on in the town during the day, during the school year. What hasn't been figured out yet, as far as I know, is exactly how all of this is going to work with the hybrid model for the school, and with the need, of course, to have fewer people on the bus, have the driver protected and all that sort of stuff. So although we aren't involved from the point of view of the town in what the school is doing, it's something that certainly affects what's going on around here, and it may affect the frequency of the buses, the timing when the buses go, and things of that sort, all of which would have some effect on the town and the traffic that's going through the town. So let me just talk a minute about what we do with people that don't drive, because if more than 80% of our people drive their own cars, there are some that can't or don't want to. the Council on Aging through MART, the Montechusett Regional Transit Authority, has a van that is used by the Council on Aging for medical trips for seniors and disabled, and for some senior trips. They occasionally have other trips, and they used to have commercial buses that would come and take seniors on trips. They haven't done that in a while, but the van, but they are looking into the possibility of additional van service, and something that isn't on the slide, but that's being looked into now, kind of relates to cooperating with the surrounding towns, that we're going to be working with MART on the possibility of sort of sharing information of ride needs with surrounding towns, so that the councils on aging can perhaps coordinate trips once people get back to having multiple folks on a van. So anyway, that's something that is ongoing. Hasn't been much of it used during the pandemic, but it's definitely something that before and later is something that's important to the senior citizens and potentially to others. There was an effort for a while to look at having people volunteer to drive other people around in their cars, and that was not pursued apparently because of liability issues. But it is a way that people can potentially help each other with driving. And there's also a program, although people pay to belong to it, there's something called Neshoba Neighbors that has a village model that people who live in complexes such as the Pondside or at the senior housing, some of the over 55 places can belong, and they share rides and share equipment and things of that sort that can be better. During the course of our study, Marion, I've actually heard of some people who use ride sharing. It's all private, of course. There's no coordination in the town. And at least at the moment, we don't have any data from any of the ride sharing companies. We could perhaps get it. I don't know if we'll need it for the master plan or not. We might think about that, but it's really hard to say. There are some shuttles though that are used now from like, for example, from Devon's to the Littleton station. And there's one in Maynard that goes to Acton to commuter rail. And there's effort in Stowe to sort of regionalize that. And we've been talking with Stowe about the possibility of perhaps linking up that way. So part of the work of our group over the next number of months is going to be to coordinate with the other towns about those kinds of shuttles to public transit and getting people around when they don't have any other way to do it.
Can I make one correction though, Ken, to the Neshoba Neighbors, is that it's an organization that the goal is going to help people to age in place. And it doesn't matter where you live. It's a membership program. And one of the things in looking at all of the other villages throughout Massachusetts, in talking with them, transportation is the #1 issue that most of the members found that they wanted. And so it is more than likely that Neshoba Neighbors will have a volunteer car service for its members.
Okay, that's even better than what I thought then. That's good. Anyway, so we're happy to take questions, but we're going to keep working on ways to try to reduce the traffic impacts. The MassWorks program seems to be a really good one right now, and we're hoping that whatever they end up deciding to do at the intersection by the high school will end up helping other places as well. And we're certainly hopeful that the light that Aquatic is going to make things better rather than worse. And all of that. And then we'll continue to explore these conflicting issues of everybody disliking traffic, but everybody wanting more businesses, but lower taxes at the same time, because it doesn't add up. So anyway,
And has there been,
so that's what we have.
Ken, are there any preliminary statistics or projections on the implications of people getting used to working from home in the pandemic and possibly continuing to do that, and the impact on through traffic, Bolton traffic, and regional traffic? Is that something that
I haven't seen anything that's been done locally. There's a lot that people are talking about, and there's data that's being collected more in the cities. There's been some study in Chicago area about the difference in traffic levels and things of that sort. But I think that there's certainly a sense that people have that working at home is going to continue more than it did before, and the trips that we thought were needed can actually be done by Zoom. But there's nothing concrete on it, and there's nothing at all concrete for us yet. I mean, I will say at the moment, whether the traffic, whether people have started going back to work or not, there is certainly not the traffic on 117 that there used to be. Even though, you know, we're in the reopening stage and stuff like that, it just is not as much as there was. There's more than there was in April, that's for sure, but there really isn't a huge amount now. But I think by the time we get to actually writing the master plan, there may be more data that's actually available and more supposition on the International Transportation Conference in Washington are all virtual. And one of the things that everybody talks about in all these virtual things is the effect of COVID-19. But there isn't a huge amount of data yet, so we don't know.
We do have some rough data that's taken from those speed signs that are the 4 speed signs along 117, and comparing. I was looking just at the sign that is across from 62 Main Street for westbound traffic, and I looked at last year compared to this year for April, May, and June, and you know, traffic has definitely is creeping right back up. So from last year to this year, there were 4,047 fewer cars daily average a day. In May, it was down to 2,603. And by June, there was only 851 less cars. And this is in AM traffic between 6 and 7. So it's creeping back up.
Yeah, and in fact, I read one study that said that the rural areas had pretty much come back to normal. It's really the urban areas, the big commuter areas like Boston and some of those places where they're slower in coming back.
Well, we're car dependent.
That just could be because of
So,
of the businesses and stuff.
I don't know if everybody's aware of this, but the Cracker Barrel was recently purchased, and the owners are planning to turn it into a general store. So that, you know, if that gets off the ground, that's obviously going to have an impact on 117.
And I also heard that the truck exclusion has been denied by Clinton.
Yes, so that, yeah, all right. So with the truck exclusion, Berlin selectmen approved it and Clinton did not. I contacted Don Lowe. I asked him, does this mean that it's dead in the water? And he said no, that they are still pursuing it. So, you know, we're keeping our fingers crossed on the truck exclusion up Aquatic. The design now with the lights and the sidewalks at that intersection with the turning lane makes that a failed intersection for these big tractor trailers to take left-hand turns up to Aquatic. So I'm really hoping that we can get this through.
Saying it makes it a failed one?
Because they can't do it. I mean, they're going up
Yeah,
on the
but they-
sidewalks, they're taking up other lanes to make the turns.
Yeah, but
So
they do it anyway.
it doesn't work.
My experience in the past has been that they do it anyway. I was actually standing at the intersection once when a truck ran over the stop sign as he went around the corner. So it doesn't seem to stop them as near as I can tell.
Yeah.
Okay,
Anyway,
well,
any other
any
questions?
questions?
anybody has? And I guess an overall question I have is this what you had in mind? And is this a good model for other people and for the kind of TED Talks that we're talking about?
Yeah, I thought it was fine. I mean, they're going to be different. There'll be different formats with different subjects.
Yeah, it's great, Ken.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was actually going to say one thing we might want to consider doing is coming up with just a really quick one pager on the speed limit information, because I thought that was really helpful and people are always talking about it. And it'd be great to just have it in one place so people understand.
So the real irony would be with people speeding now in the pandemic, the speed limits could actually go up.
Yes, and that's especially true with trucks. Especially early in the pandemic, the trucks were flying through the metropolitan areas where nobody was working anymore because they were still making deliveries and they were always held up before. So their average speeds have gone way up and their deliveries were a lot faster and stuff. And so, but I agree with you that
Anyway, I hope I'm incorrect in that one.
No,
Well,
no,
I
actually,
think
those
you are
speed
correct.
radar signs also measured speeds, and there was a slight increase in speed
That's wonderful.
along 117, which would make
Mary.
sense. Fewer traffic allows them to move faster.
And one of the good things about the project in the center is, if I'm not mistaken, they narrowed the lane in order to put that bike lane in with the parking beside it. And so that narrowing of the lane at least somewhat slows down the traffic. Maybe not a huge amount, but at least partly it does.
Okay, I think
Any of this, that's for sure.
if there aren't any more questions, Stasha, there obviously is.
I'm sorry, guys. I know it's getting late. I'll be super quick. I just I did not realize that those sign or those speed things actually capture information, which is so awesome. And so, Mary, just a quick question. Do you have data on the sign that goes down the hill to the intersection of 110 and 117, like speed data?
We have data for all 4 signs.
Okay, can I talk to you offline about that?
Sure, I can actually send you.
Oh, that would be
Send
great.
you the
Thank
data.
you.
Okay.
And so I would beg to your group just to a consideration based on, I live on Still River Road, so we're constantly going through that intersection of 110 and 117, and obviously there's been so much talk from the DOT reports and the just the accident reports, and so it's exciting to have data. I know there was an article like 5 years ago that was approved by the town for new lights there, which obviously never happened, and so just putting in a plug for the fact that because I drive through it every day and I see people fly through that light and it's a red light and it's just a scary intersection. So just a plug for if there's any data, which is, exciting to hear, that it would be considered.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, and one thing we'll try to do in the master plan is to incorporate some data from those signs so that it gives a better sense of this, and especially we can reflect what it's with and without, given the pandemic. So we'd be happy to include some of that, because that is
If you guys need any pictures, like bike safety, people crossing there, I mean, it's an accident waiting to happen or worse. So it's a great spot for, and I know Forbush is right up the hill and there's kids crossing the road there, and there's, you name it, they're all along, Manor, and there, you got a lot on your plate, and everything costs money. So I'm not trying to, push one over the other, but if there's actual data there to go off of, that's exciting. Thank you, guys.
Okay, well, if there aren't any more questions, our next meeting is on Thursday, September 24th at 7 p.m. And Ken and will include that at the end of our meeting minutes. And look forward to seeing you. And I'll check in with folks in the individual task groups to see if additional help is needed. I'm retired now, so I can help. Have been for quite a while, actually. But if that's it, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
Second.
All right.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Ken and Mary, that was great.
Thanks.
Yep,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you
good.
so much.
Good
Have a
night.
good night.